What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another week of Sports QuaranTV with Chris Dobson and Gerry Green. We've got a lot to go tonight, as we do every week. Jerry, we're going to do things a little differently this week, though, because we did have a great conversation with President and General Manager of the St. John Sea Dogs, Trevor Georgie. We'll air that at the end of the show. So we're going to trail off and end the show with the QMJHL this week. But, of course,
sounds good.
Something a little bigger is happening this week. Maybe, I don't know, Super Bowl 50 is coming up. LV, as you pleasantly corrected me last week on the TV. I have a lot of thoughts to talk about here. We got Patrick Mahomes. We got Tom Brady. Jerry, let's get right into it. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it's LV, isn't it?
That's
55.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's what I meant, yeah.
I don't want anybody sitting on their couch saying, these guys are so stupid. Why do they know LV's 55?
Trust me, it's not going to be people on the couch who already realize that. Go
I'm
ahead.
looking forward to, hopefully, and look at, was always a New England Patriot fan. Was a Tom Brady fan, too. Didn't like the fact he left. And I can see how people didn't like him when I liked him. Now I can see why people don't like him. But what I'm trying to say is I think it's time the torch got passed. And who better than Mahomes to take it? I mean, he's a dynamic fellow who's committed to his team. He's going to be there for 10 years. Didn't he sign a 10-year contract for $500 million? And I think they're offensively are tough to beat. I was looking at the stats, Chris, from the game against Buffalo, of which Mahomes was 29 for 38, and he had 325 yards passing. Didn't run very much, but the threat of him running is what's big for any defense. But the fact that he threw to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, caught 22 passes for 290 yards. So 9 for Hill and 13 for Kelce. And Chris, as we talked about last week, Buffalo knew that those are the guys he's going to try to get the ball to, but they certainly didn't stop him. And I think that's going to be Tampa Bay's biggest adventures, to try to stop those two guys and keep Mahomes in the pocket.
You're absolutely right. And if you look at their numbers overall this season, I mean, Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady went 2-3 as far as QBs go in the whole league this year. And like everything they've accomplished, talked about Travis Kelce, who's an absolute beast. I liked your term, and I liked your reference about passing the torch, but don't pass it just too quickly just yet. Tom Brady's still got a few more fumes in the tank left here, and he's made it very clear. I saw an interview with him this week saying that, if he has the opportunity to, maybe he'll play till these past 45. I think he's 42 this year. But if you look at the weapons they both have collaboratively as units, this is exactly what the NFL wanted. This is the Super Bowl that the NFL was looking to put together. I mean, it's a weird year, very few fans in the building. So what better way to market it? Let's have Tom Brady. Let's go with the GOAT against the potential guy he's going to pass that baton to down the road. Yeah,
and the weapons that Brady have, he's got a little bit more balance of an attack, but doesn't really have a standout superstar for me. I mean, Mike Evans is a good player, but he doesn't. Brady doesn't always find him. Both teams have running backs that can break a big run, but it's not the prime focus for either one of them. But I was looking at the numbers for Aaron Rodgers in regards to Tampa Bay's defense, and he threw for 346 yards and was 33 for 48 and threw 3 touchdowns against that Tampa Bay defense. So that's where I see them be the opportunity for Holmes and Kelce and Hill to rip up that defense. I know they have a pretty good secondary, but I think Kansas City's defense is I would give them the check mark if there was a column that they would be a little bit better than Tampa Bay's defense.
I'm glad you brought up the Green Bay game, because if you look at how that all played out, the Green Bay defense proved that Tom Brady is human after all. And I mean, they found some of the weaknesses. Unfortunately, the O-line just couldn't do what they had to do. And, Aaron Rodgers, I think he got sacked 5 games in the championship game. So overall, how that whole thing played out is, you're absolutely right. If you're Kansas City right now, you're watching game film. But Tom Brady's going to be ready for it. I mean, it's going to be good exactly how it is right now. But overall, I tip my cap to the defense. I think Kansas City's defense is going to get it done. I'm not a prediction. Actually, no, I'm a prediction guy. I'm going with Kansas City. I think Kansas City beats Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we saw Aaron Rodgers down on the ground a little bit too much in the NFC Championship game. But this is where Mahomes has the difference. He's smart. He anticipates that stuff, and he's quick to get out of the pocket and break defenses down. And so that's where I see the big advantage for Kansas City. It is in Tampa Bay, which has never happened before, has the home team played in the Super Bowl. So that's going to be thrilling indeed. And of course, the weekend's going to be there for the halftime. So that'll be fun too. So the last time Tampa Bay won, we talked about it last week, was Brad Johnson was the quarterback, but he wasn't the Super Bowl champion as Tampa Bay beat Oakland. And that game was in, I believe, in California. California. But let's move on to the next subject anyways, Chris. We want to talk about the NHL, and we want to talk about specifically the North Division, of which we in Canada see primarily games between Canadian teams. Have you or do you feel like it's wearing on you a little bit with many of these back-to-backs, of which there's another one tonight, there'll be another one tomorrow night? How do you feel about the division itself?
Okay, so when we shot this show before the NHL season started, we were both pretty amped up and pretty excited with the concept of a North Division, seeing all these back-to-backs. Is it starting to get a little tedious? At times, but overall, I still love it. Watching these teams play in the rivalry heat up, like, I'm going to use the Calgary Flames as an example. Anytime you watch Tkachuk battle anybody night in, night out, get pounded, just lose his temper, do everything he does, and then have to go right back at it against the same team the next night, I absolutely love it. Where I do feel, though, is I feel for the teams like the Ottawa Senators. You look at this Vancouver Canucks team, who's also a very young, very talented team, but, they get pumped, and I'm going to use the Montreal Canadiens as a prime example for that. Every time, other than the one game they lost, they seem to get pumped constantly by, we'll say the Habs. The Habs are offensively, the Habs are great. But at the same time, I feel for that. And it's kind of like, okay, we've seen enough. I'd like to see the Habs play someone else. But I do miss those rivalries, like you mentioned off camera, the Habs and the Bruins, for example. We don't get to see that. But overall, I still like it for now. Ask me again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, there are the pros and the cons in regards to Ottawa on a bad slide, goes all the way out west and has to come all the way back again. And in the midst of, I think, of a 7-game losing streak. The fact that there is those rivalries where you have Calgary and Edmonton haven't really played. I don't think they played yet, have they? I don't think. But that rivalry that you get, and they saw it the other night with a couple of teams, it was Winnipeg and Edmonton didn't like each other too much. And so those things do happen, but this is still early in the season. So I'm still a little, at times, like when you have a doubleheader in baseball, Chris, usually one team wins the opener and somebody wins, usually always a split. And that's what I'm seeing with these back-to-backs sometimes too. Almost always you see a split on two teams that are very competitive, like your Edmonton's Winnipeg, your Calgary and Winnipeg, and so on and so forth. So, and I do miss, Boston going to Toronto and embarrassing them, and Montreal playing Boston, and Sid and the kid Sid coming to town in Canada, because I'm really not noticing any other division than the East Coast division, of which has the Pittsburghs and the Philadelphias. Those are the ones we get to see on Sportsnet, and we see an awful lot of them: Boston, Washington, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. The other night they had Buffalo and New Jersey on, which was a snoozer. But there's an opportunity where Ottawa doesn't get to play another team, because I think the whole North Division is that much better than Ottawa, so they have a tough night every night.
You are right, by the way. Calgary has not played Edmonton. Their first game of the season Saturday. They're going to go for the first time since the year started, and I'll be excited to see how that goes, because overall, if you're the Edmonton Oilers right now, you got to start something to try to fire these guys up. And 6 points and 5 points by your respective superstars probably they need more of it.
Well, speaking of that, let's move on to that. Let's move on to. I guess it's a fad, or it's something's going on in the NHL where you've got players requesting to be traded. The latest was Sam Bennett. And I know Mete, who played the other night for Montreal, he said he never did request a trade, and maybe it came from his agent. But what's going on here? Dubois and, of course, Laine and Roskovich get traded, and it had something to do a little bit with the requests of the players. Are we seeing a trend here?
Well, yes, we are. I'm going to use a couple examples. You talk about Mete saying, hey, you know what? I didn't officially ask for a trade. Then you had Claude Julien in the media saying, hey, look, I've talked to Victor. I knew exactly what the plan was. I told him I was going to do my best to get him into a game as soon as possible. It's a fresh legs thing. It comes down to an agent situation. But let's go back a couple of years to current Montreal Canadian, now former Tampa Bay Lightning, Jonathan Drouin. That whole fiasco took place. And again, it was all had to do with his agent didn't report down to Syracuse when that all took place. But even before that, you were throwing out some great names: Eric Lindros, Patrick Waugh. This goes on for a long time. But as far as players dictating where they're going and how it's all working today, I think a lot of it's come down to entitlement. And I want to talk about Patrick Laine just for a second, because overall, Laine handled it better than anybody I've ever seen. Laine didn't come out and ask for a trade. He was very professional about the whole situation. He was not going to say he was happy, because we'll never know what happens behind closed doors. But overall, he came to the rink every night. He made it very clear he wanted to play on the top line. But I think it's at a point where you look at your Dubois and your Bennett's and these guys demanding trades right now. Look, you got drafted to play in the National Hockey League. You haven't earned that right yet.
Well, my research had shown me, Chris, that it's usually some superstars are the ones that request trade. If you remember way back, Paul Coffey really requested a trade out of Edmonton that sent him to Pittsburgh, and Craig Simpson went back in that trade. But one that stood out for me that you forget about is Chris Pronger way back in the day. Edmonton did a great job to acquire him. He was a stud on their defense. He was just what the Oilers needed. They went to the final. I think it was against Carolina that year, and Carolina beat Edmonton in the final, didn't they? Yes, that's right. And then the very next year, he requests a trade, and really it wasn't him. The scuttlebutt was it was his wife that requested that he be traded because she didn't like Edmonton. So be it an agent or a wife, sometimes there's outside pressure. It's not just the player.
Now, did Chris Prong? I'm trying to remember this. I'm trying to go back here. Is that when he went to Anaheim?
Correct. That's when he went to Anaheim.
Did he win a cup in Anaheim?
I believe he did.
Okay.
I believe he did.
So you're right. You got to talk to the family. If the wife's not happy wife, happy life, they say, Jerry.
Well, let's stick with the NHL, Chris, a little bit here. And we talked about Edmonton and what opportunity, what a great opportunity. Wouldn't it be great for them to have somebody like Pronger on the blue line? Because they're having difficulty winning games, and they're having difficulties winning games with two big studs up front in Draisaitl and McDavid. Is this going to be a case where McDavid can't win a championship in Edmonton, something similar to, let's say, Trout in Anaheim can't get to the World Series? What's your perspective on that?
Well, if you go back 2 weeks ago, and I brought this up, it was a final topic of mine quickly, and I passed over it. But if they don't figure out one way or another how to help Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid's going to demand to get out of Edmonton. And this goes back to our trade conversation. I'm not saying it's happening anytime soon, but Edmonton has had year after year after year after year to figure it out. And just when they thought things were going in the right direction, and, the Edmonton Oilers build that beautiful new arena that based off the back of Connor McDavid, everything is going their way, but they still don't fix the blue line. And this all goes back to the Taylor Hall for Adam Larson 1-for-1 trade. To me, at that point, you have to ask yourself, what is going on in Edmonton? I mean, they've got all the tools they need. You've got arguably the new face of the National Hockey League. He's probably the biggest superstar this league's seen since Sidney Crosby's come in. I don't know what else you have to do. You got to get him a goaltender. I said this a couple weeks ago and you agreed with me. I mean, you had every opportunity from a free agent perspective to grab a decent goaltender to come in and get you what you needed, at least somebody you had confidence in. And Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl look at it. They put up 11 points the other night.
Yeah, it'll be disappointing if they have to leave town to win a championship. Speaking of trying to win championships, the Q is back up and running, as we know, but specifically the Maritime Division finally got back up and running, Chris, with Cape Breton and Halifax and Charlottetown playing over the weekend. What were your impressions of the games as we still have New Brunswick stymied?
Yeah, look, we'll start with A. I think it's fantastic, like we said last week. I think it's great. The QMJHL and the Maritimes is back. If you look at the games overall and how it's gone, it's just, it didn't feel right to me, Jerry. The product on the ice looked good. The kids were happy to be back. I saw a couple good tilts on the ice between, Halifax and Cape Breton. Things were looking good there. But overall, the guys who impressed me are still the guys who've always impressed. Look at the Halifax Mooseheads, for example. I watched a bit of the game. Overall, it's still a little weird, but I like it. I like the fact that the Q in the Maritimes is back.
So reflecting back on when Moncton, Bathurst, and St. John last played, we were talking about mid to late November. Okay, here we are 2 months later, over 2 months later, starting the month of February. How do you as a player, how do you as an organization kick it back up to when you are going to play? And Chris, I can't see, Moncton still in the red and orange in both Bathurst and St. John. I think Bathurst could swing to yellow pretty quick, and maybe St. John too, but still more cases in Moncton. What is it still end of February before even the New Brunswick part of the Maritime Division gets up and actually gets an opportunity to play games? And I don't think they'll do it in front of fans either, too, Chris.
There will be no fans 100%. I can almost guarantee that. But as far as yellow goes, and I'm not sure if you've seen it, Jerry, but as far as the chart and like the color scheme goes for the COVID protocol here, yellow is not even on the chart anymore. It's orange, it's red, it's lockdown. Those are your colors. Yellow doesn't exist. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to get a better understanding of and a better grip on, and you know, I had a great conversation with Trevor Georgie today in regards to how do you keep your players motivated throughout all of this? I mean, will we see this happen? And he's clear, and he'll tell you in the interview. I mean, he expects the President's Cup will be hoisted. He's made no qualms about that. Now, what do you do? I mean, when will we see it? It's got to be at least the end of February, I would think, but there won't be any fans in the building. There won't be.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, and the interview will be very eye-opening for me, because you know how I feel about whether or not a cuppy is going to be handed out in any type of form this year. And I know the Q is determined to have a President's Cup champion. You know, you have activity over on the Quebec portion with these bubbles, but when do they run out of money, and when do they run out of how many bubbles and how many games? They can only play a few games with each of these bubbles, so you're not racking up a bunch of games. I guess you're just staying active. Is that what they're doing, Chris?
Well, that's what he's doing. He says he's got the guys. They're at a hotel in St. John right now. They're being taken care of very well. I mean, he's in constant communication constantly. They are on the ice. They are practicing. They're trying to stay in game shape. I think he said they had their first scrimmage last week, I believe. But I mean, if you look at that St. John roster too, Jerry, I mean, yes, they've had a bit of a tough start to the season, but overall, things could round themselves out pretty good. And of course, Kotkov possibly coming on in. I mean, it's going to make things very good for them.
One last thing before you go, Chris. I didn't give you a score for the Super Bowl. I'm going to say Kansas City will score at least 34 points, and I'm going to say Tampa Bay 24. 34-24 KC.
You've heard it here, folks. Absolutely. Jerry, as always, this has been another great show. I love every time we get this chance to chat. Guys, make sure you stick around, because we do have a great interview lined up with the president and the general manager of the St. John Sea Dogs, Trevor Georgie. We'll see everybody next week. Very excited to be joined by a good friend of ours now, president and general manager of the St. John Sea Dogs, Trevor Georgie. Trevor, first and foremost, thanks for doing this. I know people have been a little impatient. You haven't played hockey in quite some time. So first and foremost, how's everybody holding up? How's everything going in St. John?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me. I always love doing your show. Things are going well, given everything going on. Everyone's trying to stay as sharp and as engaged as possible, given it's been 2 months since we've played hockey, but given the circumstances, we're all doing well.
You know, you mentioned the few months since you guys have played hockey. I mean, obviously after the Christmas break and players came back, I mean, how do you keep everybody engaged? I mean, I'm assuming they're quarantining now in the hotel, doing everything, but it must be tough for these young minds to try to keep focused on hockey at all times.
It's really tough. I know it's very hard on many of the players' mental health. Anytime you have to quarantine for that extended period of time, it's challenging. You know, some of our players have had to quarantine, for 6 weeks in the last 2 months, which is substantial. When the players quarantine, most of them all quarantine at a hotel here in town. We have gym equipment set up for them, exercise bikes, various meals, and kind of a variety of menu options for them that are delivered, and healthy choices. So we do all we can to give them the right environment, but it's still tough. They want to be on the ice playing hockey. They don't want to be cooped up in a hotel.
So with the current situation happening here in New Brunswick, are your guys allowed to practice right now?
Yeah, so we're allowed to practice while we're in Orange. So our players were back on the ice on Wednesday, last Wednesday, and they're able to practice. Ryan Francis has now joined the team for practice, which is great after he had his 2-week quarantine. So we can practice. The restrictions are still strong and in place in terms of masks and different sanitization and daily temperature checks and our COVID app and all that. Our COVID manager, Jeff Kelly, is very vigilant with all that, which is really important. But we're practicing. I know on Saturday the guys scrimmaged for a bit, which is fun to watch. I know I enjoyed that. It was the only live hockey we've really been able to see. So you take the little wins along the way in a season like this one.
So I'm glad you brought up Ryan Francis, because we were kind of talking a little off camera in regards to, the acquisitions and the moves that were made for you. When you and I spoke in the spring, you had big aspirations for the Sea Dogs for the next 3 years moving forward. Talk about this trade period specifically, and exactly, it was a different trade period than we're used to. I mean, obviously with the COVID protocols in place, there were some big moves made by you and the Sea Dogs organization, and starting with the acquisition of Ryan Francis, bringing a leader like him into that group of players must be something phenomenal for you.
Yeah, I mean, we got to see Ryan very closely over the last few seasons. I mean, he's burnt us a number of times with all his talent and skill. For us, we're looking for an older game breaker to insert into the group to give them a little bit of experience. If you look at the games that we lost and the 15 that we played, apart from one, all of them were 1-goal losses or 1 goal plus empty net losses. And so that one kind of goal difference would have either a save here or an extra goal there would have made a big difference for our group. So having a game breaker like Ryan join is big for us. And obviously being drafted by Calgary, we had a lot of conversations with Calgary, with the folks with the Flames, with great ties to that organization about Ryan's kind of development path. And we anticipate that we'll have him back next year as a 20-year-old. If we look at around the league, we saw him, Simoneau and him being kind of the top 2 offensive 20-year-olds in the league next year. So we want to do our shopping early and get Ryan while he was available.
One of the big moves you guys made, of course, and I'd get executed online for not asking about it, of course, was to see Joshua Ottawa, first overall pick. He did get dealt. He had a great haul. Jerry and I were talking about it last week in the return that you did acquire for Josh. And, was it just something that was a better fit for you guys moving forward for the development and what you guys were looking to do?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, our preference was to keep Josh. Our preference was not to trade Josh. We were notified by Josh's agent that, he would have liked to play in a different market. And based on that, we looked to see if we could have accommodated him. Fortunately for him, and we were able to. For the team, we were very, we had certain criteria for the return that we wanted for Josh, and if that criteria wasn't going to be matched, then we weren't gonna move him. And so, we did get that matched, and we look at. Losing Josh is difficult, but then we were able to bring in a guy like Francis on the right side that can replace that offense for at least two seasons. And the picks give us a lot of liquidity. We had different possibilities of players and different combinations of things. But given the uncertainty of this season, given how unsure everyone is about playoffs and Memorial Cup, and is it going to be next year? Or is it going to be punted another year? We decided that the best thing for us was put the money in our pocket and then assess at the end of the season where we're at as a team and then where we're at as a league with all the changes.
It's almost like you read my mind and you were going into my next question before we got there. You talked about the President's Cup and the Memorial Cup. Do you believe we will see a President's Cup hoisted this year in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League?
I believe we're going to see a President Cup hoisted this year in the QMJHL. I'm an optimist, so I might be the wrong person to ask, but I really do think there will be a President Cup hoisted here in the QMJHL. What I'm not sure of, I'm certainly less optimistic about the Memorial Cup, and it's just my opinion. But I anticipate that being a really hard thing to pull off. The OHL hasn't started yet. It's quite an event to pull off. So I think if there even is one, it'll look a lot different than what we've seen in years past in terms of the fanfare and the attendance, but might even look different in terms of the teams attending. My feeling is that the Mem Cup is in question, and that even if there is one, it's going to look a lot different than what we're used to.
So overall, let's look at the first part of the season when you guys went on into it. I mean, you're not quite, I'm sure, exactly where you wanted to be, but a lot of your losses, I think 6 or 7 of those were shootouts or overtime games. I think 3 or 4 of them is where you lost. You mentioned lost by a goal. What significant changes do you see coming if there is a second half of the season for you guys? And I mean, if you don't see significant improvement, is that a reason to hit the panic button going into next year?
Panic button. I'm not someone that ever believes in hitting a panic button in any situation. I think it's important to, when you've thought through things and you have a process and you take all kinds of different opinions and you analyze, I don't think there's a reason to ever hit a panic button. So no panic button for you, Chris, although that's probably the more sexy answer is that yes, we're going to hit one, but no panic button. For us, we're disappointed with the first half. There's no two ways about it. But it's also only 15 games into this coaching staff, into Greg Gilbert's tenure with the team. So, for him to work on correcting certain habits and getting his systems in place and getting that buy-in, it takes time. And so that's one piece. Two, a lot of the players that play meaningful minutes for us, some of them, like Cam McDonald and Peter Reynolds, they're 15 games into their CHL careers. So that takes time to adjust. And the margin of error, again, as you mentioned it, like you're talking about one goal or shootout or an overtime goal, by adding a guy like Ryan Francis, hopefully fingers crossed by adding a guy like Vladislav Kotkov shortly, that'll make a difference. And I think by also adding Zachary Amon, in terms of just his experience and the leadership that he brings, having reached the pinnacle and having won a President Cup and Memorial Cup, I think all those things can help kind of close that gap between winning and losing.
Last thing I'm going to ask you, we're going to get away from hockey just for a minute, just so we can have a little fun before we go. Someone told me that you were a little stoked to see Edge win the Royal Rumble on Sunday night. I just want to know how that impacted. Were you excited about that?
They're not
You're a big
wrong.
wrestling guy. You're a big wrestling guy.
Your source, I usually say check your sources, but your source is quite good. I'm a big wrestling guy. I love wrestling. Grew up, I think, dreaming of being Vince McMahon one day as a kid. So it was great. It's the first pay-per-view that I've watched in a long time, and seeing Edge come back and win it, there's some nostalgia there. Good Canadian as well, from Orangeville, Ontario, and it was awesome to see. So that was a lot of fun. And you know what? Now I'm gonna have to tune into WrestleMania to see if he can win the belt after a long hiatus. Are you wrestling? You're a wrestling guy too, aren't you, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Fun fact: Edge lived in Memram Cook for a while. That's something you can put in your hat for a while.
Come on.
Yeah, him and Christian both were out there for a bit.
Really? Were they doing independent circuit there, or what were they doing?
Yeah, they were doing independent out there.
Wow.
Boom. There's your fun fact for the day, Trevor.
Mind blown.
Awesome, brother. As always, Trevor, I want to thank you so much. President and General Manager Trevor George of the St. John Sea Dogs. Trevor, it's a pleasure as always. Can't wait. Hopefully we'll see you in the rink as soon as we possibly can. Best of luck the rest of the way.
Thanks, Chris. I look forward to it.